Good evening, good evening, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Behind the Pen, where purpose driven stories come alive. I'm your host, Coach Kesha. I'm also the founder of the VTF Collective. And tonight is special because this is the season two premiere. We went through 22 authors, 22 episodes last season. And now that we're in a new year, the first month of the year, this is our season two premiere of Behind the Pen. And we are back with deep conversations, bold voices, and stories to challenge us to think differently, to grow, and to lead differently. This season is about transformation, it's about truth, and most importantly, it's about impact. And tonight's guest is someone whose voice is urgently needed in this moment. We're talking about education. Not only education, we're talking about equality, belonging, and what it really means to reimagine schools, right? But before we jump into this conversation, I would like for you to do three things for me. I would like for you to share the broadcast, share it with an educator, a parent, a leader, an administrator that you may know. And then if you haven't already, I would like for you to subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. So we're going to jump right in tonight. I'm honored to welcome Melvin J. Brown. He is an educator, a leader, a consultant, and not only that, he is the author of Roaches in My Cereal and the Moral Imperative to Reimagine School. He has served as a superintendent in major school districts. He is currently serving as the superintendent in residence at Define LLC, and he's the president and CEO of Soul Vision. His book is not just like a memoir, it's really a manifesto. It bridges lived experience with this critique and what we like to call how you can reimagine schools and serve children, especially those who are marginalized, right? So help me to welcome Dr. Melvin J. Brown. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. How are you today?
I'm doing well, doing very well. It's been a hectic day.
Yes, same. I totally get it. I totally get it. So we're gonna jump right in. We're not gonna, go through any formalities or anything. I'm gonna just jump right into the questions.
Sounds good.
Um, so the title "Roaches in My Cereal" immediately grabs attention. What does that title represent for you?
Originally it was pretty simple in that I wanted the book to be somewhat of a memoir and talking about childhood and things that I faced as a kid, um, and tell my story essentially. And then I figured out, I said, you know what, you're not that important. How do you connect this to real life experiences? So, from the physical, actual perspective, growing up poor, in the trailer with no running water, not having resources available, having insects and rodents in our trailer during seasons in which they would actually come in. It was a real thing to be able to eat certain types of cereals and not to have them infested with roaches. So there were certain types of cereals I just shied away from and would never eat. I won't name those; that's in the book. But because of you can't discern one thing from the other, I just didn't eat those cereals. So that's how it started. But when I look at it also from the perspective of the book, I wanted it to be an opportunity for people to see that there are impediments that kids face. Symbolically, we could call those roaches, that prevent them from finding their true selves, to that prevent them from finding their greatness and what they can contribute to the world. Throughout the book, I try to explore some of those hindrances, some of those traumas, some of those things that can prevent them from being whole and successful. And I do that through the lens of some of my own experiences as a child that may have derailed me or put me in positions where I couldn't be successful. But fortunately, I had adults who came to my rescue in schools that made me find what success looked like. That coupled with support from my mom, who bent over backward to do everything possible to make sure I was successful, especially given the circumstances in which we live. those are all the stories I wanted to be able to tell. And I wanted people to see those things that kids experience. There are real faces behind those things. And we can't simply look at trauma from the perspective, from a narrow view of saying, our kids are experiencing trauma, let's give them treatment. You have to look at every kid individually and the types of things that they confront and then how they confront those things, because it's all different. Therefore, the treatment needs to look different.
Absolutely agreed. So you could have written this book just from the lens of superintendent. You could have just wrote it about policy and reform.
Mm-hmm.
Why was it important for you to kind of tell your story alongside the policy and the reform aspect of it?
Yeah, I think some of those books sometimes come across as highbrow and above people, and I didn't want to have that happen. I didn't want to have I'm speaking to you and telling you what to do. I didn't want it to be that without any perspective of what lived experience looks like. I don't think in our society we value people's lived experiences enough. We say to them things like pull yourself up by your bootstraps. There's nothing in your way, or we'll say things like, oh, that's not a big deal. Shake it off and come in here and get this work done in this classroom. And I think it's important that we value those lived experiences for what they are, recognizing them, respecting them, allowing kids to live through them and support them in whatever ways we can, while at the same time not putting limits and systemic barriers to their success. Oftentimes, we look at kids from challenging circumstances, and I've seen too much pity throughout my career. Kids don't need that. They need you to recognize what the issues are, that they confront, respect them, and then challenge them when they come to school. I want to be able to support them in any way possible, while at the same time letting them see that whatever you've experienced, it doesn't have to prevent you from being successful. You can overcome that too, but you need support. You need helping hands. You need respected adults, responsible adults who are there to support you in that regard. And I think if every kid has that opportunity, then every kid can be successful. But that, to me, it was important to give voice to some of those issues. For example, if we're talking about domestic violence and what kids may see from a violence perspective, it's easy to just talk about what is broadcast on the news or what people see in the streets or on social media. That's easy. But when you talk about real people and real experiences and you put a face behind that, it looks different. And we tend to have a different level of humanity in terms of how we handle and respect those experiences that kids might confront.
Absolutely. I know that sometimes we don't always look at our children holistically.
Mhm.
We just see them when they come into the classroom. We want them to get this work done. And I'm speaking from being an educator at an alternative school for 4 years. And you really have to look at them holistically then. Um, there's a quote that you said that I like, and I want you to expound upon a little bit. You said, "Poverty is not personality; it's a condition society created." What does that mean, and what does that look like in the classroom?
So I have this belief that many of our structures in our country and perhaps in the world at large are designed so that there are always people who benefit and people who work for those people who benefit. And we've done a lot of work to maintain those structures, and that keeps people out of certain opportunities that they should have chances at. So when I talk about poverty being not a personality, we sometimes look at that poverty that people experience, and that becomes who they are. Oh, that's such and such. They don't have much. They don't have, and that's not who that person is. That person has dreams, aspirations, goals, and has never been able to find ways to reach and chase those things. And as adults, particularly in schools, it's our job to make sure our kids do have that opportunity. It shouldn't be something that defines you as a person. It shouldn't be something that prevents you from seeing what promise might look like. And for far too long, we've allowed that to happen. So if a kid comes to school hungry, we assume they don't have any money at home, and maybe they'll get meals at school. We certainly feed them, but understanding that that's not who that kid is. That's just a condition that they experience. We talk about. I've heard the quote, "A child from poverty." Or a child of poverty. There's no such thing. It's a circumstance. It's something you've experienced. It's not a permanent characteristic you carry around on your chest like some kind of prize. And I think for far too long we've purposefully created spaces where people are prevented from overcoming whatever circumstances they're in, and the masses benefit from that. That's the structure I'm fighting to tear down. Generational poverty, I think, is at the heart of everything that ills what we. Well, I won't say it quite that definitively. Generational poverty is a part of what ills so much about this country right now. And if we aren't purposeful about how we address it, those cycles will just continue, and we'll continue to have a permanent underclass. I do think there's a movement right now that is geared toward making sure that that permanent underclass, quote, stays in its place. That's not what we're supposed to look like. That's not what is in the Constitution. That's not what we tout as the American way of life, so to speak. But we prevent people from assuming those types of positions and getting in opportunities that we don't think they should have. Should never be our choice. We should never tell kids what we think they can do or prevent them from doing certain things. We've got to give them all of the options available to them and allow them to make choices for themselves.
Absolutely. So we can definitely feel your passion, and just your voice shine through and come through. Like, this is not just something that you're just talking about. This is something that you live and that you truly want to change. And so, and thinking about that, what was the moment when you knew that you had to write this book?
Oh wow. Oh wow, that's a great question. Um, it was a book that was probably in process for probably 2 decades. 20 years I sat on this thing and toyed with it, played around with it, spent a little bit of time with it, and really couldn't get it going until very recently in the last year or so when I really got it off the ground. But I'd probably say around the time I first became a principal at 28. Um, Little elementary school in my hometown where I went to school was actually the elementary school I went to, different building, but same school. And when I started to see that my responsibility wasn't just to benefit from society in ways that enrich myself if I don't give back. The whole notion of why we do these things is so we give back and enrich society to be much more successful. Yes, individually, we all want to be successful. That's great. But if we can't lift other people in the process of gaining that success, then what's the point? And I think it was at that point I wanted to be able to say, I'm a kid from this community. There are tons of kids who struggle just like me and had situations just like me. And there's no reason they can't overcome things as well and do the things that they want to do or they dream to do or aspire to do. And I didn't want to do it from the perspective that I was special because I don't believe I am. I think I had a mom who did anything she could to make sure I was successful. I think I had some caring adults at school who told me and made me believe I was better than I thought I was myself. And it made me aspire to do things. It made me inquisitive about what the world was. And I wanted to do something different. I want that for everybody. I want everyone to realize you have dreams, chase them, do whatever you can to chase them. You may not always catch them, but you'll be getting closer every time you try. So I wanted my story to be a testimony that, a little poor kid from Colonial Beach, Virginia, yeah, he can be pretty successful too in whatever avenue he tends to go into. Now, the one thing I can say about my school district where I grew up, we turned out some pretty impressive adults, particularly in the educational space. 3 people, including myself, have been or are superintendents right now.
Wow.
One was just named my predecessor for that principalship. He's been just named the Secretary of Education in the state of Virginia. So I'm proud of what my school district did, while at the same time there were adults that put impediments in front of us.
Absolutely, absolutely. So this book just doesn't diagnose problems. It invites us to kind of see children differently, right? And to see ourselves differently as educators and as leaders.
Mhm.
So you write about, there's a quote that I have highlighted. It says, "We don't fix children, we fix systems."
Yes.
Why do systems get a pass and children have to bear the blame?
I think the systems have been designed to make sure, going back to what I said earlier about structures that prevent put barriers in front of certain people. I think our structures in schools have never, from the inception, been designed for every kid to be successful. If you think back to all of the historical pieces of education in our country and how it developed back to when Native American children were put in boarding schools and basically robbed of their culture and their identity. And then you think about post-slavery, what took place when Blacks children were finally given an opportunity to go to school. Those schools weren't equal. They weren't as well equipped. They had great people working in those, but they weren't the same. And I think education or the lack thereof, the holding back of education has been weaponized in our country for centuries, for decades, and that's something that we have to address. That I think people forget that the education of Black kids, teaching kids how to read, was a crime at one point in our history, in the history of our country, an absolute crime where people were put in jail, persecuted, even murdered over teaching people to read. That's a real thing, and I think we often forget that. Education to me is the key to any avenue that might exist, and it's been very keenly constructed that if we rob you of that key, we can rob you from opportunity. It's happening right now with the movements that have taken place in our federal government. I won't go off on a tangent on those things, but we could talk about that all day. But there's purpose in that. And sometimes we don't always see that purpose. I think it's important that we recognize what that is, we fight against it, and work to basically make sure everybody is successful in one way, shape, or form.
So you mentioned we're talking about systems and policies, particularly how do policies, I dare to say, unintentionally punish students for surviving poverty?
Mm-hmm. I think about often think about our discipline policies in schools, and let me say up front, obviously you can't just permit any type of behavior to take place in places that are supposed to be safe and inviting for everybody. However, when we look at kids who act out and get in trouble and are violent or whatever the case may be, we never really comb into that situation to find out what the root cause is. We treat the symptom. So you get in a fight at school, okay, we're going to suspend you for 3 days or 5 days or whatever it is. And after that period of time, you come back to school. There's no intervention. There's no conversation. There's no, well, what caused this? How can we alleviate this? How can we mend this broken relationship? We don't do those things. So if we're not talking about restorative practices, we're not talking about counseling kids back into school, we're not talking about what is the why behind why this kid acts out, or what is the why behind why this kid falls asleep in class every day. We don't talk about those things. We just punish them. And we think punishing those things is going to correct them. That has never been the case. We're not canines. That is not how the human brain is designed. And in many respects, for kids, when you punish something, that makes them rebel even more. So how do we allow kids to understand how their actions have consequences without giving them, in a sense, death sentences about how they go about doing their business at school on a daily basis, or to become labeled? How do we go about doing that? So those are conversations we have to be purposeful in having. And I don't think we have enough. There are schools in the country who are doing a great job of having those types of discussions and putting in place restorative practices where kids now understand, I made a mistake. I did something I shouldn't have done, and it hurt somebody. Let's talk about what that looks like and what can I do to repair that situation. Enough of those types of conversations don't take place.
Right, right. So what does equality actually look like in a school building?
Well, equality and equity, I are to me are two very different things. Equality is when everybody gets access to the same opportunity, and you got to have both. So that has to exist. While at the same time, equity is when when certain kids have advantages over others. How do we compensate for those things when they come to schools? For example, a really simple example I always use with teachers. If our goal today was to make sure every one of our kids left school and had $10 in his or her pocket, one kid comes to school with $2, another kid comes to school with $5. We intend for them both to leave with 10. Therefore, we have to give them something different. It's just really that simple. If we want to meet our goals, we've got to make sure kids are able to get access to the things that kind of level the playing field. So when we're cutting programs like like after school programs or pre-K or Head Start. When we're cutting these things, we're robbing kids of opportunity. Um, Families who have means, have wealth, they're going to visit places. They're taking kids to museums. They're going to other countries. They're seeing all these things in the world, and that enriches their experience, which makes them more apt to be able to be successful in the world. How do we account for that? How do we level that? We've got to expose kids to things. Now, no, we can't take a classroom full of kids to Switzerland on a field trip. I get that. But you can use technology, you can use books, you can use movies to take kids to places they've never been before and expose them. There's so many tools that are available to us from a technology standpoint that would allow us to do those things. And we're too concerned about, oh, we got to raise test scores. Well, yeah, we got to raise test scores. I get that. That's important. But if you realize that changing conditions in the classroom and making kids feel more of a sense of belonging, you're going to make them raise test. You're going to make them more successful in that regard. And guess what? You're going to raise test scores. So we have to be more intentional about how we go about doing that. Simply saying we're going to raise test scores and then really not doing anything to make that happen isn't the answer to the question.
Right. Uh, when you talk about some of these invisible barriers, or when we talk about invisible barriers, a lot of times adults who don't have children and aren't in the school system see something on the news or they hear something and they're just like, oh, I just can't believe that. Why can't they do this, that, or the third?
Mm-hmm.
What are some of these invisible barriers that most adults never see that are causing these kids to be mislabeled and judged in
Mm-hmm.
this way?
Well, a couple things about the media, and I think people need to keep this in perspective as well. They don't report on the good stories that happen at school. So if you go an entire day in a school and there's no fight, there's no news crew coming to cover that. It's the one anomaly or the two anomalies that pop out that get attention, that garner press coverage. But I think the majority of adults don't spend time in school, so they don't see what happens on a daily basis. They don't see the structure of school being, and I'll dare say, mimicking much of what the prison system looks like. The way kids walk in line, the way they have to be quiet in the hallway, the way they can't talk to their neighbors, the way they have to meet, be so. The idea of a good classroom is where everybody's quiet and no one's saying anything. That's not really a great classroom. I've always told teachers that I want to see loud classrooms. I want to see discourse. I want to see kids wrestling with ideas, arguing even if about ideas, so they can get to the best solutions. I want them to make mistakes. They learn well from their mistakes. And if they're not challenging themselves, if they're not pushing their boundaries, we'll never know what their ceiling might be, and they won't have a sense of what can I possibly get done. There are kids walking around in high schools right now with a huge acumen to do well in school and take high level coursework, but they don't, because we as the adults say, oh, this is going to be hard for you. And you're a straight A student taking these standard level classes. Well, you know what? I'd rather for my kids to get B's in AP courses than to get A's in standard level classes. But we don't understand, we allow those things to happen, or we make them happen. We say to certain kids, that's not for you. That's for those kids over there. I want every kid to be successful. And if we have a kid who hasn't shown a lot of success in school, but suddenly has this interest in taking a high level course, why not allow him the opportunity to do so? It's his right to fail, if you will, and it's our job to support him. Something else I would talk to teachers about, if we felt kids had all of the knowledge in a particular subject when they walk through the door of the classroom, then why do they need us? They don't. Our job is to give them that opportunity, to give them exposure to whatever those topics are and allow them to explore those things authentically, not just to give them information so they can regurgitate it on a test. I want kids to really learn information that sticks and stays with them, and they see the purpose in education. If it's not something that's beneficial, then why would they be motivated to do it? Everybody's heard the question, you're in an algebra class or a geometry class, and kids say, well, why am I doing this? How's this going to help me in life? We need to make sure they understand how it's going to help them. Have that conversation, show them what that looks like. And all of a sudden, when they see purpose in it, they're going to be more prone to actually try to do it much better than they were before. Those are things that we as the adults have to get out of the way. And this whole idea of control, just releasing give kids some of the control of school. Let them have some power in school to make some decisions or be involved in decisions, or to make recommendations, or to say, hey, can we structure it this? Can we do this at this time? Kids can be part of that conversation. I'm not saying they get everything they want, because obviously structures have to exist. They exist for a reason in some regard, but they can have a say. They have to have a voice. And if they don't, they're never going to enjoy school. I had a couple of really good teachers in high school. Mrs. Ingram, who was phenomenal as my English teacher for 2 years and my advanced communications teacher for another year. But for the most part, I hated high school because it was so structured. I couldn't stand it. And I wasn't a great student because of that.
Yeah, sometimes being overstructured can be a disadvantage.
No question about it. It's a
It's
turnoff.
restrictive. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And education isn't just academic,
Not at
and I
all.
think that's what we've been saying tonight. That is, it's moral, and we have to shift the way that we think about leadership
Mhm.
and these policies and structures that we have in place, because we're really doing some of the students a disservice.
Absolutely.
Uh,
We're
how
having a
would
really
you?
dangerous conversation right now about work and career education. And I think there's certainly a purpose in that. I think there's a place for that. But when it comes to when you subscribe to a philosophy that school is to prepare kids for jobs, it loses much of what school is supposed to give a kid. We don't create widgets in schools. We create people, human beings, and then those skills that they're interested in can translate to jobs and careers. That's what it's supposed to look like. But my job is not to say to a kindergartner or a first grader, you know what, you're coming from a impoverished background, we're going to make sure you have at least a $70,000 job by the time you graduate high school, so let's start training you as an electrician right now. That's not our job. That's not what that's supposed to look like. He's supposed to find that interest on his own.
Well, I think it's also generational.
Mm-hmm.
We're I don't want to say brainwashed, but it's ingrained in us, especially depending on the culture that you come from.
Mm-hmm.
That you go to school, you get an education, so you can't get a good job. And so, you have students in school, like you said, just bored and hating it because they're like, I just got to get through this so I can get a good job. I got to get a
Yeah.
college degree so I can get a good job. And we're never exposed to all the multiple avenues
Mm-hmm.
that can lead to having a good job or starting a business or all the other things that we can do. So, this is such an important conversation, and it's such an important book for now, especially right now, because I think there is a shift happening with all the stuff going on politically. I think there is a shift happening in education. And so
Mm-hmm.
I want to stop for just a moment to thank everyone who's been watching. If you haven't already noticed already, in the upper right hand corner, there is a QR code. It will take you to the page where you can purchase a copy of the book. Purchase a copy, come back and drop in the comments and let us know that you purchased, so we can shout you out. I know this is a surprise for you, Melvin, but I also want to take a moment just to congratulate you on becoming an Amazon bestseller.
Oh,
Your
wow.
book did make the Amazon bestsellers list.
Oh, wow.
So congratulations to you. You charted
Thank
in the
you.
educational professional development category. So congratulations on becoming a best-selling author and Roaches in My Cereal being a best-selling book on Amazon.
Thank
So
you so much.
congratulations
Thank
to you
you.
for that. You're welcome.
I-
You're welcome.
I'm excited for people to glean nuggets from it, and to realize that, in writing the book, I did not want it to be a book necessarily about me per se. It's much bigger than me. It's about the issues that kids confront. And I'm just an example of a kid who confronted some issues. That's the way I look at it.
And it's funny, that's a perfect segue into our next segment where we kind of talk about this concept of belonging. You say that belonging is the foundation of learning.
Mhm.
What happens when students don't feel safe or seen?
Yeah, when you're in those situations where belonging doesn't exist, kids are never able to be themselves, and I think it goes for adults as well. You go into spaces where you're never comfortable. You're never able to fulfill who you are or become who you want to be and share that with the world. You're always trying to mimic or imitate someone else so you fit in. And I think there's a very different, Brene Brown talks about this a lot. There's a very different, a huge difference between belonging and fitting in. When you fit in, you are part of the group because you have characteristics that are similar to the group. When you belong, you come into a space as your own full person and you give all of yourself to that environment and you still fit. That's what that's supposed to look like. When kids have to hide themselves or pretend that there's something that they're really not, or that they like something that they really don't, they're never able to be fully successful because that's stress. That's a distraction from actually learning. If I'm coming to school every day and I'm dealing with imposter syndrome, where I have to show up in a certain way that isn't how I'm most comfortable, I'm giving energy to that I could be putting into a particular topic or a subject or into my subject matter. So belonging is essential. And when you're told that you don't belong, or you get the feeling that you don't belong, it ruins much of your experience. You turn off to that experience. You never feel like it's going to be beneficial for you. You don't see the purpose in it, and you're never going to fulfill your whole self if you're in those venues. I think back to kindergarten. I talk in the book about Ms. Marchant, who was my kindergarten teacher, who from day one made sure I knew I fit and that I belonged. She showed me things that I never thought I could do. She exposed me to, my mom was really good about exposing me to books before I got to school, started going to school. But Ms. Marchant took that knowledge I already had and built on it. So here I am in kindergarten, and she has me going to second and third grade math classes because she wanted to push me. She wanted to challenge me. And I loved it. I know not every kid's going to love that, and it's okay because I had to miss recess. But I was like, she believes in me. She never had to say it. She never had to write it on a piece of paper. Her actions showed me that she believed in me, and I wanted to perform for her, even if I didn't want to perform for myself. So much of my confidence as a person, and even the gumption to even share this story, it comes from some of what she instilled in me when I was a 5-year old. We don't think about kindergarten that way, but I do because it had that big of an impact on who I am.
For sure. I remember when I was uh, a teacher and I had three students, and I had to take time. It was a 4-to-1, a 1-to-4 ratio where it was one teacher to four students. I had three.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to change everything about my lesson plan and gear it towards fishing. So algebra, fishing,
Yeah,
connection, everything. And he really received it because
yeah.
I saw something that he was interested in. And I remember the principal telling me that nobody could work with him, but I managed to work with him and see him through graduation because I just picked up on something that he loved
Mm-hmm.
and he was able to receive it. So when
Mm-hmm.
you're seen, or when somebody else expresses interest in what you're doing, it
Mm-hmm.
can make all the difference. All the
Mm-hmm.
difference.
It's a huge way to just value humanity for what it is. We all have gifts and traits that we bring to the table, and they're all different. And if we put them all together, we could be such a cohesive, fantastic society. But unfortunately, there's so many forces that tend to separate us and break those connections, so that we're never able to fulfill what that might look like. I won't get into the political conversation right now.
No worries. We'll be on here far longer than an hour. Um, um, how does trauma show up in classrooms?
Ooh, so trauma is going to show up in a number of ways. When you see kids who are so quick to demonstrate violence, there's probably some trauma associated with that. If you see kids who are withdrawn in class for whatever reason, there's something behind what that withdrawal looks like. When kids see things in their community or in their household or in their neighborhood, those things follow them to school. Kids who see other human beings being killed, they have to come back to school. They're bringing that trauma with them, and it's going to show up in one way, shape, or form. As a child, I was really good about compartmentalizing and pretending, convincing myself somehow that certain things didn't happen to me or that I didn't experience them. But that will manifest in other ways. It will come out. And in the book, I talk about that a little bit, how it showed up for me. Um, we have to value that trauma and deal with it. If we just try to say, oh, they're going to be okay, their kids are resilient. Yeah, they are. They are resilient, but they need supports. We need to recognize what that looks like. If we see that's far too many of our kids are seeing their parents, their mothers being beaten, they're seeing gun violence in their communities, they're seeing, well, we can see what they see on social media. And even in this day and age, with what's happening in our politics, we see what's happening in neighborhoods on the news. But I'll put that aside too. That's traumatic. I mean, yeah, you know what I will make one point. If you think about a child who's watched his mother or his father being snatched away from him by an ICE agent, and it's a 5-year-old who will sit there and watch that, that's traumatic, and it's going to show up at school. They're not going to come back to school the same way the next day. That trauma shapes your brain, it shapes your development, and if we don't deal with those things, that development is stunted. And suddenly we have gaps in what kids are supposed to be able to do successfully or to achieve or to access that they can't because those synapses have been turned off for whatever reason. That's where we have to deal with trauma. I firmly believe in counseling and all those other wonderful things that we have access to. Those are not nice to haves. Those are need to haves. We have to have those devices in schools to support kids. In some ways, to support the adults as well.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely, to support the adults. I've always heard people just make off the cuff comments like, oh, they're resilient, they'll
Hmm.
bounce back. But, we have to process through traumatic things, and children have to process through traumatic things as well, because
Absolutely.
a lot of times they don't have the language
They
to
don't.
even understand what's going on. And so, when you even talked about the news and media, that was one of the first things that came to my mind. Children who have to witness their parents being snatched away or just even harassed. And how
Yep.
do you explain that to a child?
Right.
It's very hard to do. So we talked a little bit about how trauma shows up in the classroom. What does it look like um, to build schools rooted in healing? And I know that that's a big question, but what if you can even conceptualize it? What would that look like?
Yeah, I don't think I have the magic bullet, if you will, for what that looks like, but I do have some things that should contribute to it. Like schools have schedules that are completely structured. You go from one class to the other. They're all 50 minutes long or 90 minutes long if you're on a block, whatever, and you just do that. We don't realize in schools we can break that time up and do things a little bit differently. As long as we meet the minimum number of minutes that a state requires for education in a particular subject area, we can break that up. So we can use time in school to give kids opportunities to simply talk with about their issues, to have a mentor that they meet with, to meet with a business entity that actually is interested in what they can they can potentially bring to their business in one day, that could happen. That those things can take place. We can have things like genius hours. Like a lot of schools have employed genius hours, which give kids an opportunity to work on anything that they want to. 1 hour a week, you get to do whatever you want. That gives kids ownership. It gives them a sense of belonging. It gives them a time to work on something that they like. And if I can get you to come to school for something that you like, I can also get you to learn something that you don't like. But I got to get you there first. And I got to get your whole self there. If I can do that, all of a sudden I can change everything for you. But our structures are just off-putting for kids. It's tough to sit through 4 90-minute blocks during the day and 4 subjects that you can't stand. And no one is making those things relevant. They're not making them applicable to you. You're not seeing yourself in that coursework. You're not seeing literature that talks about people like that you're familiar with. You don't see yourself show up in that literature. That's hard to do. They're going to be turned off, which is why I did not love high school. So many aspects of the way classes were structured, I didn't see myself in them. I mentioned Mrs. Ingram earlier. I am so thankful for her because in her English classes, I showed up. I saw characters that I could relate to. I talked about books that I still read and talk about now in her course. And that's why I was always a great English student and taught English before I became a principal. So she had a huge impact on my life.
I am a big fan of always making things practical and
Mhm.
applicable. How does this, I'm teaching you this, but here's how you can use it right now, today in your life. And I think that we get so structured, so boxed into the lesson plan.
Mhm.
and what the school district wants, needs, that we don't take time to think outside of the box.
Yeah.
What are some ways that you would encourage teachers, administrators, and leaders to kind of start thinking outside of the box and not being so structured in how the school day runs?
It's so much easier now with technology to take any particular lesson. You can put it into any of these engines that exist, a ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever, and ask it to give you your same lesson plan dictated back to you through the lens of something that your kids are interested in. That's easy to do now. We couldn't do that back in the day. Before, I had groups set up that might work on this group might be working on that idea, and this group working on this idea, and you still want to do those things. But now you can be very creative about what that lesson plan looks like. And yes, you got to teach standards. Completely get that. Yes, you do. You have to teach the standards. That's the core of the job. You have to do that. I get that. But the standard doesn't have to be taught from the lens of, okay, I'm going to stand in front of the class today. I'm going to lecture to you on information. You're going to write it in your notebooks. And next week, I'm going to test you on it. And you're going to pour it back on that test. Because the very next day after that test, if they learned it at all, it's going to be gone. They're not going to retain that information. I'm going to cite Mr. Williams, my fifth grade teacher, who was another one of those people who pushed me and showed me things. I talk about him a lot in the book. There are lessons I learned in his fifth grade class that had nothing to do with the lesson or with the standard per se, but I still remember them and use them today and learned the standard. I think I was at the height of my academic interest right there in fifth grade. He did that for me. And he showed me that school doesn't have to always be in the classroom. We would go outside and we would explore the environment. We walked through graveyards around near the school, and we taught through those processes. He was teaching us the entire time. We loved that class. And I can say that probably for everybody who was a friend of mine during that time, loved Mr. Williams and loved that class. And I think as teachers, we have to get out of our own way and just, as I mentioned earlier, give some control to kids. We go to, as teachers, we every day we go in there and grind, and we go home and we're tired and run down at the end of the day. Kids supposed to be the ones that are tired at the end of the day. So how do we figure that out? Let's design
Exactly.
lessons to make them tired. It's because they've been working and they've been thinking and they've been wrestling with ideas and they've been pushing their limits. That's what school is supposed to look like. So loud classrooms have always been a fan of. I've always been a fan of those as long as they were productive. And I've seen some great chaotic classrooms. Organized chaos is what I would call it, where kids are all over the place, but they're doing the work and they're talking and they're sitting on the floor and they're in the corner and they're sitting at a table or on a desk and they're fussing about these ideas. That's what education should look like.
I love the way that you refer back to and talk about these teachers and these leaders that made an impact in your life. And I always wonder, why don't we have more stories like that? But there's always one, a teacher, a coach, or somebody. I mean, I can
Yeah,
think of two
we all have
people
them.
that popped into my mind, and you're right, we all have them. I had a math teacher, Miss Craighead. um, I know I passed her class, but she taught me more about life
Mm-hmm.
than she did about math. And like I said,
Mm-hmm.
I know I passed, but I can't tell you what I learned. Or
Mm-hmm.
like I distinctly remember learning about division in her class. No, I don't, but I remember the life lessons that she taught me.
Yeah,
Um,
Mr. Williams in my fifth grade class taught me so
mhm,
much about what it looks like to be a man,
mhm.
a professional black man. Um, I emulated so much of who he was throughout the time I was in school because I wanted to be like him. And I know I did well in this class because he made sure I was going to do well in this class. He wouldn't accept anything less than that. Um, I'm hoping as a teacher I had that impact on some kids. Um, those are the things that give me joy to know that a kid. Well, I recall one student just last week when I posted the information about the book. He reposted it and said something to the effect, "I was the most positive educator in his life." That nearly brought me to tears because that's what it's supposed to be about.
Right.
And I hope every kid can have those experiences. There's somebody in every school that can let every kid have that type of experience, and we need to make sure those adults are matched with those kids.
So what courage is required to reimagine school?
Oh, wow. Well, we have to get out of our own way. We have to break these habits that we've had for a century, from the beginning of time. We have to be able to convince the powers that be, superintendents, school boards, communities, that we can structure this differently and be more productive for kids. Show them the research and then show them results. It takes time. It's not going to be neat and packaged, nice and neat. That's not what it's supposed to be. Messy. That's what the work is supposed to look like. It takes uh, knowing that in some respects, when you try, well, I'll put it this way: when you try a new strategy in a classroom, I think many of our teachers are afraid that that strategy, because it's new, might not be successful and it's going to impact test scores. We've got to somehow get that way of thinking out of the classroom. I want teachers to try new and different things. What new strategy can you use to teach this particular concept? You want to try it, give it a shot. If it doesn't work, you know what? We go back to the drawing board and we start all over again, and that's okay. But we're in a culture now where everything has to be done the right way the first time, and if it's not, then there's something wrong with you, and that's not how it's supposed to look. I know for a fact, when I first took algebra in eighth grade, and was not a great math student, didn't enjoy math. I know I didn't do it well the first time, and Miss Thompson was like, "That's okay, you're gonna do it again." And I hated it and loved it at the same time, because now I have an opportunity to try this again. And it's not going to be something that stays with me for the rest of my life. But we realize things like, give the way that the grading scale is set up, for example. We have 60 points on a grading scale to measure failure. We have less than 30 points to mastery. Is that equal? That doesn't make much sense to me.
Right.
Well, we need to get into a situation where kids have a standard based way of showing mastery. Can we do it in different ways? Does it always have to be a written test? Can a kid perform to show you how to do a particular to show a particular skill? Absolutely. That shows me they learned it. If they can't write it on the test, doesn't mean they don't know the information. So how do we restructure those things to make it a little differently for kids who can demonstrate those types of skills in different ways? It does take courage. It takes support. It takes a community realizing that good isn't great. Good, in fact, is the enemy of great. And if I'm in a good school, fantastic. How can we be better tomorrow? How can we improve on what we just did today? Kids need to hear that. Kids should be trying to get better every day, and it's up to the adults to give them the gumption, the courage, the enthusiasm, to do those types of things.
And I think another challenge is just being comfortable.
Mm-hmm,
Um, Teachers get comfortable, students
mm-hmm,
get comfortable. I was a really good student, quote unquote, because I had a really good memory.
mm-hmm,
But was comprehension there always? I just had a really good memory. If
mm-hmm,
you wrote it on the board and I memorized what you wrote step by step, I could translate it on a test, but
mm-hmm.
there was no comprehension. And I think we just get so comfortable in just passing students along.
And
Um,
we reward compliance. If you do the task and you are obedient and you're quiet and you're nice, he's a great student. You know what? Some of the best students are the ones who cause chaos in class. They can be some of your best students if you challenge them in the right way.
so, what would you say to educators who feel frustrated or overwhelmed with the system and feel like, there's nothing I can do about it? How would you encourage them?
I would say from your classroom, you have the opportunity to change the world. And yeah, there are going to be impediments that get in the way, that on the outside, that say to you, you have to check these boxes and do thus and so. Certain things have to be done this way. And we all have to deal with those things in our lives. I mean, as an example, when I'm on the freeway, I hate driving the speed limit, but I know I need to. So yeah, there's some guardrails you have to stay within and get those things done. But that other stuff, you can be creative. You can bring new and different things into the classroom. You can change up how your classroom is structured or how your day looks. Work with your administrator and show them what you want them to do. Present plans to open-minded administrators and principals to say, hey, I want to try this with my kids. I think back to my high school teaching experience, teaching high school English, and the typical way to teach a book was you have your whole class in front of you, you read excerpts from the book and you talk about it. It's like, this isn't getting it. My kids aren't getting this. So we started having Socratic seminars once a week, put the whole class in a circle, and we're going to talk about and ask questions. And I'm going to take notes where you're questioning each other about what you've read. and your hook to participate is that's how you get points. The more you participate, the more you demonstrate what you've read, the more points you get. But it wasn't a typical class. It took some time, particularly I was in a 50-minute block of time then, so it's hard to do that, from class to class. But it was necessary because they needed to understand the concepts. I recall teaching Julius Caesar, and my 10th graders didn't enjoy reading it, and I understood why. So what did we do? We read it, and then we flipped it up. I gave them an opportunity to show another way of understanding the play, and I remember this vividly, like it was yesterday. I had these 3 kids who took the concept. They went home. They made this home video of their version of Julius Caesar. They brought it in, shows it was fantastic. And these were 3 of my kids who did not like school and did not perform well. They were fantastic because I let them just have fun with it. And then now they know the story. It isn't a matter of them getting it the way I want them to get it. I need to trick them in getting it the way that they need to get it, whatever that is. If I can trick you into learning, let's get that done.
Absolutely. I love that. I love when creativity is brought in and you just let them be who they are. And that's when you get that spark. Um, Scrolling across the bottom of the screen for everybody who's watching is how to connect, how to purchase the book, how to access the blog, and also reach Dr. Brown on LinkedIn. Again, at the top of your screen is a QR code. You can scan it, purchase a copy of the book. It's not just about the school system and how to change it and how to reimagine it. It's kind of like a memoir as well, and so it's very engaging. It's a really good read. It's literally a must read for educators, for leaders, and really anyone who believes school can be better. Right. So we have one last question for you, and it is: if you could change one thing tomorrow in American
Oof.
schools, what would it
Oof.
be?
I put my superintendent cap on. Um, I would probably get rid of elected school boards. There's some people who might see this who are going to find that pretty funny. I do think the politics and how it intrudes into the daily workings of school um, prevent schools from being what they really could be. And I think a contributor to that I think a big contributor to that are elected school boards. Um, that is one thing that could certainly be taken away. I also think, from a more practical sense, I think we do far too much standardized testing. We know standardized tests don't necessarily show what kids know. We know that they're culturally biased, and all they are driven to do is categorize kids. I don't care about putting kids in categories. Kids should be in one category. What does excellence look like? Let's put them in that category. So I think peeling back some of those layers would help us so that we can teach more as opposed to just throwing knowledge at kids.
I love that. I love that. That just brought so many more questions to my mind. But thank you so much for your courage, for your voice, and for your leadership, and for writing this book. Um, I encourage everybody to grab a copy of Roaches in My Cereal. It's the title is catching, but the story is even more important. So grab a copy, share a copy, talk about it with your teacher friends, your leader friends, your principal friends. I know in my community there are a lot of us, and it's an important conversation to have. To everyone watching, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Education is a moral act, and the work of justice begins with how we treat our children and how we view our children. They're more than just a label. They're more than just a stat or a score. They're individuals, and if we just show them that time and attention, then you'll see that spark, and a whole world will not only open up for us as educators and leaders, but for them as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you would like to leave with our viewers tonight before we close out?
Yeah, for those who've purchased the book and have read some of the stories already, either from me or they already have their copy, those are coming, by the way. I'm really thankful. I appreciate it very, very much. Those of you who go ahead and purchase it now as well, or sometime down the road and share it with someone else, I'm very, very thankful. and just want people to know that I just want to be one voice in the game to help us make kids lift to whatever expectations we want that they need to rise to. We need to lift those expectations for all kids, so they're able to be dreamers and aspire to greatness, and to be good human beings who give back to society. That's what this is supposed to look like. So I'm very thankful for this space and this opportunity. Thank you for allowing me this voice, and looking forward to what happens with this down the road.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being on the podcast tonight. Thank you so much for entrusting this project to the VTF Collective. It was definitely a joy to work with you and to read the story. And I look forward to seeing how the book just grows and continues to impact lives and kind of help us reframe how we see the school system and how we see children overall. Mm-hmm. Right. So this has been the season 2 premiere of Behind the Pen. I appreciate everybody who watched tonight. If you're an author and you have a story that matters, you can apply to be featured on Behind the Pen podcast. Our website is listed at the bottom. You can go and click to sign up to be a featured author. Also, if you are in the process of writing, you can also contact us there on our website as well and sign up. I'm sure that Melvin can attest to the process being a pleasant one.
Fantastic process. I'm so thankful to you as well. Seamless. It was fantastic. I've already shared it with a couple of people that I know who are interested in doing some things in this space.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So until next time, I am Coach Kesha, and this has been season 2, episode 1 of Behind the Pen. Stay tuned and join us next week for another featured author. Until then, everybody have a great night. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.